evening, everyone. It is your girl, Marcy Thomas, and I am so happy to be here with you again on this last Monday of August, if you're watching in real time, as we just, getting ready to round out the summer with another wonderful book, and then, of course, continue into the fall. So if this is your first time joining us, please feel free to let us know in the comments. I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta, originally a Cleveland, Ohio girl, and I just love to always see who is in the room with us, whether you're here in the States or not in the States, because we do have folks who join us internationally. So BGC Book Club was founded about 4 years ago during the pandemic as a way to really be able to come together and talk about books that are written by, for, and about us. And in that short time, even though it doesn't seem that short, it is a short time, we've had the opportunity to talk to well over 200 Black women about their books, about their work, about their genius. And I'm so excited to have another opportunity to do that on this occasion. So tonight I'm excited about frequent flyers, because in this book, we're going to get a little bit of the US, we're going to get a little bit of the international flavor. And so I can't wait to dive into it with everyone if you haven't had a chance to read it yet. And it is the sophomore novel of Noué Kirwan, who has wanted to be a writer since childhood. She grew up partly on the West Coast, which taught her to appreciate the beauty of the outdoors, while living in the heart of New York City for the last 20 plus years has taught her she can sleep through anything. She enjoys critiquing films, binge watching TV shows, and cozying up with a good book from her ever-expanded TBR or to be read list. And you're going to see all those books behind her when she comes up here in just a moment. She is a nervous flyer, but an avid traveler who can have her passport ready and a bag packed in under an hour. Ooh, tell us your secret, sis. And as I mentioned, this is her sophomore novel, Frequent Flyers. Her first novel, which you may have already read, Long Past Summer, is also a fan favorite. And so without any further delay, let's welcome Noué to BGC Book Club. Hey. Making sure we can hear you. Hello there, sis. How you doing? Welcome, Noué.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and just to be able to dive into this book that's been out a couple of weeks now. So,
yes.
Has it been a whirlwind for the last couple of weeks?
It's been pleasantly busy. I've had, a lot of people kind of shouting me out, which was nice. And different from my debut, because, when you're a debut, you're, completely under the radar. So it's nice to be on the radar this time.
Right. So yes, we know who you are now. Frequent Flyers, I see yours behind you, and then all the other books that are on your pile that you were talking about. Like you're like me with a whole bunch of books. So this is your second novel, as we've already mentioned. So how did it feel? Well, it feels a little different because people do know who you are now.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. And, it's going to continue to grow as time goes on. So what was it that really inspired you to start writing novels?
Well, the story that I like to tell is that I learned to read very early, but I was a TV watcher. So I did not actually like to read. It was something that was imposed upon me. It was like, okay, your cartoons are over. It's time to sit down and read. And it took me a while to get into it. It took me a while to kind of figure out like, oh, wait, this reading thing is very similar to the watching TV thing, except you engage your imagination far more. And so, almost hand in hand with the reading came the writing, like being like, I love this story. Let me see if I have a story in me that's similar to this story, or like an expansion on that story. And so the reading and the writing kind of came in tandem.
Oh, I love that. And I am one who loved to read as a child as well, spending time in the library, watching TV and loving to read, but realizing it's all storytelling. So
yes.
that's the thrust of it all, that it's storytelling. So you tell different types of stories. What is it that drew you to the actual genre or genres that you choose to write in?
I read, because I was a very avid reader, I read all sorts of things. But I've realized it took me a long time now. I won't say that this was something that happened to me immediately, but I realized that the parts of almost any story that I connected with most closely was always the love story. If there was a love story in it, like it didn't matter what it could be a horror, it could be, like a space odyssey. It could, anytime I encountered that, it was the romance in it, or any kind of love story that might have been happening as like a side plot that was most intriguing to me. And so then when I decided that I wanted to like really try to write something, it was a romance kind of that spoke to me most clearly.
And you do such a good job of it. We're going to get into it here. So, frequent flyers, for those who may not have had a chance to read it yet, because it's a little less than 2 weeks old at this point.
Yes.
What is the story about?
It's about a young woman named Lanie who has these bridesmaids duties that keep her going back and forth from New York to London. And on her flights, she encounters this handsome seatmate, although of course he's annoying when they first meet, who is doing the reverse commute. So he's going from London to New York for work, and friendship and romance ensue.
Yes, it definitely does. It definitely is a rocky start. So like, who is this dude? I don't like this dude at the beginning. But that's really what the story is about. But there are a whole lot of other things that happen in the telling of this story. We get to see, discover who they are as they get to know each other. We get to find out things about how they function, why they make the choices that they make, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. I just I like once upon a time I liked what was called chick lit, which was always there was always a nice romance, or frequently a nice romance in it, but there was also all this other life being lived in the pages. And so whenever I'm telling a story, I always have to like add this extra, like it can't just be about these two people falling in love and connecting. It always they bring baggage with them, and I want to know what it is. I'm always interested in that part.
Right. And for me, in reading the book, it really helped me to be invested in the characters, all of the characters really in the book, because understanding a little bit about who they are and why they would make the decisions that they made and all those sorts of things, it made them more well-rounded versus just putting, two attractive people together and then there's no substance. So I could appreciate that anyway. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, of course, as you've already mentioned, we see Lanie. She is a person who's got a lot going on. Even in the description of the book, you're talking about, she's almost completed a PhD. She has a job that's okay. This lifelong crush that she's, dealing with in terms of the wedding, and then all of the family dynamics. So she really does have a lot going on. How fun of a character was it for you to write Lanie? Because she's got a lot going on.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun because there were elements of it that I recognized from my own life. There was a moment in time when I was traveling a lot, and I have family in like my family history. I'm an American, but my parents are from the Caribbean. And the thing about Caribbean life is that you always have this, like, you have your own personal diaspora in your family. So you come from this island, and then you have family members who have gone. Some of them live in Canada, some of them live in the United States, some of them live in England. And so because of that, you have the opportunity, even as a kid, at least I did, to like visit all that family and see how that is. And this book presented me, and Lanie presented me with this opportunity to kind of show what that's like, to like be this American person with this like crazy, like lovely English family that you get to go and drop in and on their lives and see what that's like for a while.
And I enjoyed seeing that because it is something that, those of us who are American born, who we only know our family here, maybe don't have people from the Caribbean or the motherland or wherever, you don't get that type of experience. So for me, I felt it was a different type of experience and a character to read someone who's doing this and having opportunities to travel and, kind of navigating her American self and then having that be, the relationships with her family over in England who, they speak patois or whatever. And she doesn't really speak things like that.
Yeah, that I wanted to do justice to it, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't had like my English family read the book, so I don't know how well, I don't know how well I did. I'll have to get feedback from people, but I wanted to do justice to the wonderful like Black British aspect of the diaspora and that a lot of people might not, like a lot of Americans might not, have a firsthand knowledge of.
So when we meet her, we meet her as well as Ridley very, at the beginning of the story. You don't wait a long time to put the two of them together, but it's just interesting to see how they meet. And, he's going through some changes. Oh, we have someone joining us from Lawrenceville, Georgia. Welcome, Patsy. But we see they're both going through changes and they're traveling, but they're not necessarily happy about the reasons why they're traveling. So, he kind of has a bad attitude and when they meet, and she's dealing with stuff when they meet as well. Now for him as a character, for Ridley, it was just interesting to see him because he's very deep. He's very, what should I say? Kind of stodgy in sort of a way.
Yeah. I think that would be actually a very good word for it. He's stoic. I think he's lost a little bit of the fun of life. Just because there's been a lot of things in his life that have not gone the way he planned them to, and he's the type of person who doesn't exactly like change, and he likes to have a direction that he's going in and have very few detours and changes to what the landscape, and he's had a lot. So I think Lanie's also meeting him at a particularly bad portion of his life because he not only has he gone through this like massive change, but like the setting of the story is like we've all gone through this massive change. So everybody's dealing with a new normal, which I felt was kind of important to acknowledge, to sort of commit to paper for years later when other people are like, what was that like? What was that time in the world like, for people?
Right. And you're referring to the pandemic because we did not mention that yet, that even though the real time of the story isn't during the pandemic, it's like we're on the other side of it in the book.
Yes.
So we do get to see things that happen, that would have happened during that time and, what happens after the fact. So I did enjoy that you did that as well because it makes the story feel current. It makes it feel like right now. It's not something that we're thinking about from the past or, going towards the future, but it actually feels like a right now type of story. So, of course, they meet on this plane and then, they meet and then they kind of go their separate ways once they get back to London. Because the first trip, that is one thing in the book, like you can see like the different flights that they're taking because it is called frequent flyers. So it will show, okay, they've left New York and they're going to England, or they're leaving England and going back to New York or other places along the way that come up in the story. But, they get there and they kind of go their separate ways. And Lanie is really kind of apprehensive because, as we mentioned, there's this lifelong crush that she's not completely over. And well, this isn't giving anything away, really. He's the one that's getting married.
Yes.
So that in and of itself.
Yeah. It's so funny because whenever I think of stories, like, because people are always like, "Oh, that's so messy," and they said that about my first book too, and I realized, life is messy. Life is complicated, and I like that part. Like, it's more interesting to me if it's a little bit messy. So, like, I was telling people that I've like started to think of changing my like tagline to like deliciously messy, because I just love to have it be a little bit more complicated. I mean, it's a book, so I think it needs to be heightened anyway. So a little bit more than the normal to make it interesting. And then life itself, I mean, open a newspaper, life itself can be quite messy, quite, weird.
Yeah.
So she's going to her cousin's bridal shower, and her cousin is marrying her lifelong crush.
That's wild. It is wild, just off the top, because be like, oh. And it's not like people don't know this, so it's not like it was a secret crush. Everybody knows it, so that in and of itself, that's kind of wild. Even before she goes, people are like, "Are you sure you want to?"
Because she's like he's like a childhood crush, so it's kind of like one of those things where everybody was like, aren't they sweet together? And and it was like, she followed him around like a little, it was the way it is with kids, and so that's why everybody knows.
Yeah, everybody knows. So that's the thing. And even though you've grown up, people still know, because isn't that family though?
Yeah,
they're like, remember when you used to? I mean, that's just real. Excuse me. In our families, that we see, people are never going to let you live certain things down.
No.
But she goes there, and then she has these interactions. Her grandmother is over there as well, and it's just, I loved seeing the dynamics of everyone, because even though sometimes it was a little messy, because it wouldn't be a story if it wasn't something to talk about, right? Yeah. But I liked seeing how they would talk to one another, and grandma was kind of in a tough place because her one granddaughter is getting married, and then the other granddaughter might be feeling a way about the getting married. So we see that as well, and how the relationship with the grandmother navigating all of this as well. So how important was it for you to include these elders as a part of the story as well?
To me, in the tradition that I grew up in, the elders in your family are extremely important. There's like a level of respect and a level of reverence that we have for our elders. And I find that sometimes that can be missing in like mainstream books, because in the United States, and I don't want to speak too generally, but I just find in the United States there is a focus on like sort of the nuclear family. And so you don't always get that the importance of the elders, your great, your grandmother, your grandfather, like your aunties and uncles. And I feel like that's very deep in, like Black culture is all of those people. And I definitely want to, I wanted to stay authentic to that.
Right. And of course, her Lanie's mother as well, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, because it's a generational thread that's going through here that you also speak of. We'll touch on that in a minute. But we see Jonah, who is the intendant, and he is Sri Lankan. So then he's also coming from a different type of culture where he is very rooted in family and things like that.
Yeah. I one of the things that I always found interesting in London when I would visit my family in London that despite the United States being a melting pot, and despite there being various cultures, and I've lived in part, like I said, on the West Coast, in part in New York. There were all these different cultures, but they tend to be in the United States, at least I had found in New York, very segregated. Like
Right.
you have your Chinatown and your little Italies and your, um, Koreatown, and like everyone's a little siloed, in their communities, their neighborhoods, and whatever. And I found that in visiting my cousins in England, that they're very and I mean this to, and I should be more specific. In London,
Mm-hmm.
it's much more of obviously that melting pot that you hear about,
Right.
kind of where your neighbor could be like that with them Sri Lankan, and then the person down the street is from Ethiopia, and the person that lives right across the street from you might be Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody lives like on these like little lanes, and so you grow up, like the kids grow up playing with each other, they go to the same schools and stuff like that. And it was remarkable to me when I was younger, first going to England, and I didn't even understand what it was that I was seeing. But as I grew up and I realized, I was like, even as integrated as it is in the United States, everybody kind of has their place.
Yes.
And I just found it was less like that in England, and I wanted to make sure I brought that flavor to to their neighborhood, because that's how it would be. Like there's lots of surprising amount of intermarrying, and a lot of people, like just lots of different people on any particular block.
Right, and I talk about New York. We hear the sirens in the background.
And I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. I mean, we're getting a real New York experience. So I mean, it is what it is. I love it. But that was also a thing that really made the book good for me in reading it, because it was an opportunity to see like different cultures and how they meld together, and people were getting along and working together, at work as well as personal relationships. And so it was something good to see, and not always see the type of division that we necessarily see when we're here, as you mentioned. So it was good for that. But then something, and forgive me, I might pop around a little bit,
No
but because it also still becomes that thing of sometimes we hear about, are we appropriating culture? So if I decide that I'm Black and I'm marrying somebody Sri Lankan, and I want to wear something that's of his culture, is that being things like that?
Yeah.
And I like that you mentioned that as well, because it's something that often comes up.
Yeah, I've been to some I've been to a few interfaith and also intercultural weddings, and I've noted like the places in which people like pay respects to the cultures, and I've always found it beautiful. But you do need there is the need to be respectful, and to make sure that you're being respectful. And I just wanted to touch on that. Like I wanted to make sure that not just my characters, but the reader too understood that there's a sense of respect there. Not just like, ooh, isn't it cool that this guy's Sri Lankan, so we get to like I said, kind of cosplay his culture, and that is not at all what I was trying to do.
And did such a good job of that.
So,
but yes, looking at what's going on with them, and of course, for anybody who watches, we're not going to tell you everything. Excuse me. Just an opportunity to kind of whet your appetite to go pick up a copy of Frequent Flyers. But we're going to talk about some of these themes. Now, when all of this is going on, of course, with Lanie, and she's back and forth and helping to plan a wedding and all the different things to go along with that. And we get to see all of it. And, that part, we're also watching how Ridley is dealing with his work situation. He's dealing with a personal situation. He's also still dealing with grief.
Yes. Yeah. So he is a, also no spoiler here. He's a widower, and he is making, well, I mean, one could argue like Lanie is making him make his first like foray back into the world. Like he's intrigued enough by her that he wants to try to make, you know, an effort to revive his social life kind of, and like see what's out there, you know, after a decent, pretty decent period of mourning. And you know, I just I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know where that came from. Some of it, like I discussed with my dad, but I
Okay.
think that there are recurring themes of grief in my books. Just because, you know, as I'm getting older, I think I'm just starting to think about those things more. And so yeah, so he's trying to figure himself out as he's meeting someone that makes him want to figure it out.
Right, right. Because I mean, that is a thing, you know. If a person has been in a long-term relationship and now, you know, it ends for something that would be considered tragic reasons, you know, to lose a spouse like that, it would be a process.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, navigating that process, and you know, feeling, you know, a type of way. You meet somebody like, I like you, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure about this. And then, you know, there is a child involved, and, you know, how is it going to impact the child and all of that, you know? So, yes. And I love that you wrote him that way, because it gives him, you know, it gives him depth, number one. And these are the types of situations that happen in real life.
Mm-hmm. I kind of felt like also, um, we so rarely get to see those aspects of like black manhood, like having to navigate like loss and having been dedicated to one woman. You know, these are not the narratives that I think a lot of times people get disseminated, you know.
Right.
And but I wanted to make sure that you see a man who was dedicated to one woman and now is trying to, you know, is not sure-footed in his attempt to possibly um, engage with another woman, you know, because I don't know, it seems to me like black men they're either like super suave,
Right.
or they're like, you know, like kind of playas, but you know, and it's like I wanted someone who was a little bit more awkward and a little bit
Yeah.
more like, you know, I'm out of this. I don't know how to do this anymore. You know, I loved my wife and now
Mhm.
I don't know how to speak to women.
Right, right. And I loved him for that reason, to be honest with you, because he's a little nerdy. I mean, he's very nerdy, because
He's
I mean,
very
he's
nerdy.
brilliant. He's a doctor, you know. And you know, and Lanie isn't a slouch either. They're both very intelligent people with scientific minds and all these sorts of things. So it's like I love that, because yeah, nerdy is good.
Exactly. And you know, I think the blurs out there that deserve their representation. So,
Yeah.
you know, black nerds all the way.
Yes, yes, I love it. Because actually, my mom and I were talking about that not too long ago, about, you know, people being a little nerdy, and I said, well, I guess I'm a little nerdy myself, you know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Me too.
yeah, so I love it. But you know, I in watching him, there is this thing that he has to kind of decide, you know, I like this woman. Do I want to be with this woman? You know, I'm starting to get these feelings because I keep running into her as we're on these frequent flights, henceforth the name frequent flyers. They're going back and forth and running into one another, ultimately, deciding to connect and have conversations and, not just meet each other on flights, but also, start to develop a relationship. So, but at the same time, we're looking at Lanie, who she's not so sure either.
She's like unlucky in love. She's not maybe the best judge of character. She's been burnt before, and so it's not that she's cynical. She's just like sort of out of it. Like she just does not make good choices. Her friend says that she has a broken picker. So she just is not a good judge. So and it's made her maybe a little bit um like reserved about really pursuing something, because of the fact that she's always wanting to pursue something and always like being like, oh no, this is not the guy for you. And
Right.
so yeah, so she's I think she's at the point finally where she's kind of woken up, and she's like, maybe I don't know who the right guy is. Maybe I just don't have that discernment. And
Right.
and it might possibly be right when she meets the right guy.
Right. And in the book, you bring up a concept of limerence. That's that nerdy part of me. Limerence. Oh, I hadn't heard that word before. So, what is limerence for those who might not know what that means?
So, limerence is it's a term that refers to people who tend to sort of fantasize about love more than and more unrealistic ideas of love, and they tend to do it very quickly. So you might meet someone and you look at each other across a crowded room, and this person's already like, I'm gonna be Mrs. such and such, and we're gonna have this beautiful wedding. And it's like, whoa, you just saw this person. You haven't exchanged words with them. You have no idea who they are. Like, perhaps you should wait. So I called it like a baby version of love. It's like puppy love, but even less, honestly, even less solid than that, because like with puppy love, you have time. This is someone that you've spent time with. It's just, but it's, you're like kids or something, where this is something that even adults do when they're just, like a serial romantic, like someone who's, it's not necessarily a bad thing unless you use it to make bad choices.
Right.
Yeah. So
right. Yeah. So there's that. And as I was reading, I'm like, probably been there at some point.
Yeah. I had a couple people tell me that. They're like, limerence, I didn't know that had a name, but I definitely recognize it.
I've probably done that at some point in time in my life. But then back to the point of the generations. She comes from a family where the women also haven't necessarily had the best experiences. And they have taken their thoughts about love and romance, specifically her mother, and kind of put it on her as well. And so that did make me think about how oftentimes that happens in families.
Well, yeah, there's a generational trauma to it. And it's actually doesn't start with her mother. It started with her grandmother. And it's moved down. It's like these situations where they also maybe have not made the best choices, and they've used that as like the explanation of all relationships. Like, all relationships are not really going to pan out because we all have bad judgment, we all lack the discernment. And it's like, well, if you say it like this and you pass that on to your daughter, and she's going to pass that on to her daughter, and you end up having this like cycle of people that don't feel confident in their ability to choose well for themselves. And they weren't entirely wrong. Like, they did not choose well. So
But I guess the thing of it is just because you didn't choose well doesn't mean that you
Exactly.
always have to
Ex-
not choose well. That's one.
yes.
Two, that doesn't mean that your daughter or, the people in your family, daughters, nieces, whoever, aren't going to choose well because people can learn something different.
Exactly. And I think that's where it becomes like a curse because you you've added some sort of destiny to it. Like you are destined to, like, at any moment her grandmother could have made, it would have been a little bit more difficult for her grandmother, but her grandmother could have made a different choice. Her
Right.
mother can make a different choice. Her mother's still, a relatively young woman. She could make a different choice for herself. But it's this idea that we are just playing out these destinies. Like, we're destined in our family, this family of women, to make these like poor choices.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate.
That's unfortunate, and it does happen, because I
Yeah.
can think of people that I know in my family who everything they might say about a man would be negative. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
It's
exactly. Exactly.
like, but that's not necessarily true for all. So
No, exactly. And this is this is a romance, so this is about breaking generational
it's
curses.
about breaking those curses. So, of course, along the way, these are some of the background things, the backdrop of what's happening. And, Lanie and Ridley do get to know one another over time and, start liking each other, not sure what to do with that like of each other. So for those who, if you're looking for something that's going to happen overnight, it really, even though they meet at the beginning, it's a slow burn.
Yes, I admit I like a slow burn. Like, I like the back and forth of a relationship. It makes me, I like, as a reader, but also as a writer, I like to have to work for it. You got to work for it. I'm not a big insta love person. Like, like I said, we see each other across a crowded room and already instantly there's a connection. Like, I don't mind love at first sight. I just question it.
Same. Right. Okay. I mean, not to say it's impossible, not to
No,
say.
not at all. I want to believe in love. So yeah, absolutely.
Right. It can happen in a lot of different ways. But yes, that slow burn. It was good to read it and see it. And, I mean, we knew because it's a love story. We knew that ultimately that there would be a connection made, but just watching it grow over time. Because the other thing for me, it allowed them to like be more vulnerable with one another. It allowed them to build a friendship, which oftentimes doesn't happen if it's all hot and heavy from the onset.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I am not I'm not a I love to read enemies to lovers. I'm not as good writing enemies to lovers, but I think that a friends to lovers situation, I think I that is very it can be very rewarding.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
you have to move into that. These are two perfect strangers who first, they're I would say, and again, I don't think there's any spoiler to say that they're attracted to each other
Right.
pretty quickly, but there's a friendship that has to kind of come first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But in the midst of all this, there's all this beautiful and glorious international travel. So, I know I said in your bio that you don't like to fly. You're a nervous flyer, but you
I'm a
like to
nervous
travel.
flyer. I'm a very nervous flyer, but like I said, I once upon a time I had a job that, well, I've been flying for a really long time, and there was a point in time, like, I think when you're young, you don't have that sense of, like, basically your mortality. So,
Mm,
when I was little, I loved to fly, absolutely adored
mm,
it. Like, it was the coolest thing ever. And it was only as I got a little bit older that I did become like, I was like, oh my God, we are, like, talk about physics. Like, we are defying physics here in this gigantic, 20-ton, like, steel bird. And all of a
right.
sudden, it's like certain things that you should just not think about. You're like, listen, the scientists say that this works, just trust them. But I just couldn't, after a while, I just couldn't do it. And so I just became a very nervous flyer. And even as I had a job that required that I fly more often, I just got more and more nervous instead of less, unfortunately. So, but I love to travel. So I try not to let it stop me.
Yes, I need to get back overseas as well. I have not been overseas in a while, but I liked it that we got to see, New York and a couple other places as well, New York and London. So just from your perspective of being able to study, of course, you live in New York, but in your research or study, did you have to go back over to London or England to see what it looks like now versus what it may have been before, or were you able? How did you?
I did. So like I said, there was a period in time when I was about 10 years or so when I was going back and forth to London all the time. But this, because of also the pandemic, there had just been a long break in when since I'd been last. And so I was like, I need to go back just to like kind of soak it up again a little bit, touch in with my family, kind of get that vibe again. So I did that. And then there's like another place in the book that, they kind of go to that I went just to see like kind of what that was like. And I used to live on the West Coast. So, there was that too. Okay. So like there was there's definitely that part. And, they talk about different places that, that Lanie's been and stuff. So, cause just the idea of like passports and airports, I love all of that, all of it, the big board with all the places. Like one day, I've always said one day I'm just going to come with my suitcase and I'm going to look up at the board and I'm just going to be like, I'm just going to go to one of the places that's up there. Wow. Like, wherever the next flight is going. That is like a bucket list thing for me to do.
I love that. Just to say, hey, I'm going. Yes. And it's also good just to see, because, as Black people, seeing us engaged in that travel and doing it regularly, because there are people who may never step outside of, the United States, which is fine. But just to see that there are those that are going back and forth, there might be Americans choosing to live in London or living other places, and just even seeing a bit of what that experience is like to be a Black person who has, who's living someplace else, not just visiting.
Yeah. I'm always intrigued by, people who picked up and moved to, a different country. And I mean, even I think about what my parents like picking up and moving to the United States. I'm just like, wow, how did you do that? Like, how did you leave home and just decide to like start your life somewhere completely different? And, again, not a spoiler, but, Ridley's an American who did that, who decided to just pick up his life and move to England. And I just find that so intriguing.
Yes, especially for the reason why, which you read the book to find out why. But yes, it was good to see that and just to watch them over time develop. And then there are other cast of characters in there, like for example, Jonah, who is, the boyfriend or lifelong crush. We get to see him and learn a little bit about him and, his family, and even the connection that he had with Lanie, and how that shifts now that he's marrying her cousin. So there's that. And then of course her cousin Gemma, and her life and what's happening with her, and to get married and make these different changes in her life as well.
Yeah. I wanted there to be at least a little bit, this is primarily Lanie and Ridley's story, but every person is defined in part by the other people in their lives and, you know, who they are with those people. And I wanted there to be, you know, the Lanie that Ridley sees and the Ridley that Lanie sees. And then, of course, the Ridley that is the father to his daughter and the Lanie that is the, you know, granddaughter to this grandmother that she loves so much and cousin to these cousins that she adores, and like who and how you're slightly different with these people, but and the ways in which you are the same, and particularly that Ridley and Lanie get to see of each other, like they get to see,
Right.
you know, the real them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to go here. It is a slow burn, but then
Okay.
it does burn. I'm like, okay. We get to a point where it does burn. So yes, and it was good.
Thank you.
But
you know,
yeah,
I just it's a thing where I feel like you wait so long, there's got to be a payoff. I owe you that. So
yeah, you don't want to be disappointed. Be like, that's all it was.
exactly. After
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, all that. But just from the, you know, and you all can tell by our smiles and our giggles what we're talking about. But, you know, just from the aspect of writing, like you said, it's this slow burn, and then you get to the space where, you know, people begin to engage in adult behavior. As a writer, how is it writing those types of scenes? Is it a challenge or?
No, I mean it's definitely, I mean I aspire to a time when, you know, I'm how many ever books in and it's like, that's not a big deal, but right now it's still a big deal. Like it's still a challenge to write. I still, you know, struggle with my parents are going to read this. And you know, people I know are going to read this. And and are they going to judge me for some of this stuff or are they not? And you know, and then actually just the writing of it can be a little awkward, and you know, I actually workshop my love scenes with my writing, like a writing group that I have. I workshop them to make sure that they sound right and then they do what they're supposed to do, and
Right.
then that sort of thing, just because you know it can be it can be challenging. I know writers who don't think it's a big deal, but I'd say more writers that I'm familiar with are like, it's not my favorite part of writing it, believe it or not, you know.
Right.
But it's necessary, and it can be, you know, it's cathartic for the characters to
Right.
do, to finally do it. So
Right. Right. And I can imagine, because, you know, as I'm reading and I'm thinking, how can I put it? If a person who's in the midst of is not thinking, oh, this went here and that went there and the leg went here and the arm went there, you're not thinking about that. So to have to sit and like kind of break that down in your brain so that someone
exactly.
else can read it and feel like, ooh, okay.
Yeah,
You know,
no, and you have to workshop it, because you do get a moment where you're like, and I have gotten a note, not in this book, but in my previous book, where I was told like, Imani, this is not actually possible. Like
right.
you know, just logistically, that's not physically possible to do. So maybe rewrite this part a little bit.
Right, right, right. So that's good. So yes, for those who read frequent flyers, know that yes, there is some steam in there. But I
Yeah.
mean, if it's in the right place. It's not steam just for the sake of being steam, because that's the thing too.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like things might be just for shock value or whatever. It is a natural progression of the slow burn that's happening in this story, and it's just a part of life. So yes, but it was like, okay, it's about time.
Well, and that's another part of it, is that it if it's just there to be there, then it didn't need to be there. It needs to be. It's supposed to. If if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it's supposed to progress the relationship. It's supposed to show the progression of the relationship, and it's supposed to tell you something about where the characters are. If it's not really doing that, not to say that gratuitous, is not
Mhm.
cannot be fun. Sure, it can be,
Right,
but like
right.
I like to think that it's also serving a purpose.
Right, right. And it depends on what kind of book you're reading, because some books are just gratuitous. Just
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that.
there's nothing. That's what it is. But this is something that's in the context of a story and telling a story and watching people fall in love and and all those sorts of things. So yes. Yes. And then of course, well, some things we're not going to talk about just because, there's always that tension. There's always that thing that happens that, maybe might throw things out of whack. You have to read the book to find out what those things are. You have to read it for yourself, and and also to see how things end, because of course this is an international long distance relationship. So obviously there are decisions that have to be made along the way,
Yes, and challenges.
and challenges. So it's really good. I told you I enjoyed reading it. I devoured it in less than 24 hours, and it is about 400 pages, y'all. So it's good. Reading,
Thank you.
because I'm like, yes. so so I know that you are still, the book is only a couple weeks old, so you are still out there, promoting and things like that. So are there any particular events or anything that you have coming up in the next few weeks or so that people might be able to either watch you online like this or meet you in person?
I don't have anything planned as of right now, but if you follow me on Instagram, like I will definitely, promote anything, tell you when you can, see me elsewhere. But as of this moment, no, I don't have anything planned.
Okay, well that is fine. That means you get to take a little bit of a break, because I can
Oh
imagine
yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. Yes. So Noe, are you working on any other things right now, or are you truly taking a break?
No, I'm
I
actually
know some.
working on book 3, so
Okay. 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 Well, that's exciting. That's exciting. We'll definitely be looking forward to seeing what any time frame when that might be, next year, maybe
I
next in
don't
the new
know
year.
right now. I can't say anything right now, but fingers crossed 2026 maybe.
Okay. Okay. So every couple of years. So that's good. That's good. Well, my last question, in terms of just writing in general, because we talked about how what led you into writing, but there might be some people in the room who want to become writers. So
Hmm.
is there a particular process that you might have that helps you to write, or pull your stories together, or just any advice that you might give to someone who's an aspiring author?
Well, I think the most crucial advice I ever got, and um, advice that I could give, is one, whatever genre you want to write in, be um, a voracious reader in that genre. Just so that
Mhm.
you kind of have a understanding of, because there's specific things to writing a romance, and there's specific things to writing like a mystery and science fiction, that sort of thing. So you want to know your genre conventions. And then, or if you're writing literary, that's a little different, but you would know that as well. And then the other thing that I think is crucial is find yourself a group of other writers. I think
Mhm.
that there's so much value in getting feedback from other people, like having them tell you what works and tell you what doesn't work, and just talking it out. Like a lot of what I got with Ridley, like a lot of Ridley's story, I actually workshopped kind of with my dad, like as a black
Mm,
man
okay.
who's a father to a girl, like just how does that work? How do you feel? How that sort of thing. And then having my own critique group that I was able to send my pages to, and they could give me feedback. So like I said, I would say number one, read, 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 and number two, share, share, share.
Hmm. Which I know the share is hard because it's like it's your baby and you're like, ooh,
Yes,
what's going to happen? But then
exactly.
I can imagine it makes you a better writer. Makes you a better
It
writer.
does. And if you can't share with people you trust, then you won't be able to share with a larger audience. You can share with the people you trust, and you can get their opinion, and that their opinion is going to be constructive. Their advice is going to be constructive. What you get from the general public could be anything.
Yes. Yes, that's true. That's true. Because I've heard some stories about things, the people doing social media or whatever with authors, if they don't like a book or whatever, that is not really helpful to the author. So yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that, as well, because as I said, there are always people who are thinking about writing and want to learn more or process or anything. That's the other question. For your process, do you tend to begin with an end in mind, or do you the characters kind of tell you who they are along the way and maybe surprise you?
They definitely surprise me. I'm much more of a I kind of fly by the seat of my pants. I'm kind of a pantser. So I sometimes I see the ending very clearly and I'm writing towards that. Sometimes it's the beginning that I see very clearly, like the opening scene
Mm,
or something. I see that very clearly. And then I'm like, and now where are we going? Tell me where we're going. And sometimes it's, a character like will come and speak to me and I'd say, oh, this is my story. Those are always the best ones because then you can just be like, okay, girl, I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down as
right.
fast as I can. And there's
Mhm.
less like having to like bang out a plot. But it can come because of the fact that I'm less of an outliner. It's a much more of a things come to me, scenes come to me, characters come to me, and they tell me, what's going on with them.
Okay, I love that. So you say you're not an outliner because some people are, they have a
Yes,
whole spreadsheets and everything.
absolutely, absolutely, and I respect that so much. And I'm definitely trying to be a little bit more move into that direction because it's a lot easier. Not I shouldn't say easier, but it's a lot less harrying if you kind of know where you're going. When you have no idea where you're going, and you're just like, I'm along for the ride. I don't know where we're going. It's just like you don't know. Like there's no one at the wheel here.
Right, right, right. I love that.
So
I
it's good to
love
have a
that.
map.
Yes, it's good to have a map. Well, thank you so much, Noué. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to continuing to read your works, and you always have, an invitation to come here when you have something else
Thank
come
you.
out. Because I just love the way you write. I love the complexity of the characters in frequent flyers. Because we gave y'all like a little bit just to whet your appetite, but there was a lot of different things going on, and there's some scenes you're like, no, what? No, she didn't. No, he didn't. There's some of that in there too with multiple characters. So I definitely encourage you. She has a copy behind her, but here's mine. I definitely encourage you to grab a copy of Frequent Flyers, and then also Long Past Summer if you haven't had a chance to read that yet. That's
There
over
we
there
go.
too, right there. Yep.
Yeah.
Both of her books, get them both under your belt and, continue to follow Noué and just learn more about her through her writing and storytelling. So I'm going to let you grab some water and I'll be with you in just a second. So don't hang up. But thank you again. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. So that was a good time. I loved it. I loved the book. I loved having an opportunity to speak with Noué, and she is a wonderful up and coming author that I would definitely suggest you continue to share with other, read it yourself and then share it with others, because our authors always need our support, and it's good for us to be able to see and read stories that we might not see all of the time, something a little bit different, so that part is really great. So just by means of a letting you know what's coming up next, of course, next week, September 2nd, is a holiday, so we'll not be here with a show off, taking time off for Labor Day. No labor on Labor Day for this sister here. But the following week, there will be a conversation with Kaya Alderson about her latest book, In a League of Her Own, which is based on a true story. So look for that on September the 9th. And in the meantime, in between time, please just continue to enjoy reading. Pick up a copy of Frequent Flyers or any of the other great books that we have shared here that are all by, for, and about us. And until the next time, you have a great week, and we'll see you again real soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.